This is Gene Monterostelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 585, originally aired November 15th, 2023. Hi everyone, I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with me today. Today I have a really awesome conversation with Stefan Gonick around soulmates, how we attract a soulmate, and most importantly, how we get in our own way in connecting with the right person. But before we jump into that, two quick announcements. First of all, we have a free 10-part guide on how you can use tapping to eliminate self-sabotage. All you need to do is go to tappingqa.com, click on that big blue button, enter your email address, and every day for the next 10 days, we'll send you a little bite-sized nugget to help you to eliminate self-sabotage. Then at the end of 10 days, what you can do is you can go back and use the 2 or 3 bits that work the best from you over and over again. If you happen to be listening to this right now in the website, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see one of those big blue buttons as well. Secondly, I want to send a big shout out and thank you to all of the supporters of the Tapping Q&A podcast. These are people who voluntarily support the show, so every single week you can receive this amazing content. If you would like to be a supporter as well, receive some amazing thank you gifts, and get a warm, fuzzy feeling every single time an episode comes out, knowing that you help make that happen, all you need to do is go to tappingqa.com/support. That's tappingqa.com/support. And thank you to all of our amazing supporters. I'm really excited to share this particular conversation with you because oftentimes when I have conversations with my guests, I either have experience with the topic, I've consumed a lot of the content that is created by the guests that I'm interviewing, and it is an opportunity for me to deepen my understanding, but I'm working from a base of knowledge. This particular interview with Stefan was really eye-opening for me. And it's one of those things that once you see it, it becomes obvious, but until you see it, you completely miss it. And it's a really beautiful understanding as to why, when we are seeking connection, particularly romantic relationships, that it's possible for us to fall into a pattern of dating the exact same type of person over and over again, and that person being the exact wrong type of person for us. And the beautiful thing about this conversation is not only do we discuss why that happens, but what you can do to undo that pattern and find the connection that you want so you can be in the type of relationship that feeds you and feeds your soul. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Stefan. So one of the things I am not really interested in what people do. I am really fascinated by why people do what they do. I think that's what the juice is, because you and I could do the exact same thing, and our motivations are completely different, which brings a really unique, different richness to those particular experiences. And I know that, like, in the time that I've known you, I know how passionate you have been about helping people to find lasting, deep, meaningful, powerful relationships. How did you end up in a place where that was the thing that you were interested in, that was a place that you wanted to be doing lots of work with the great skills that you have?
Sure. Well, basically, in a word, it's because my love life sucked.
Okay.
I'll never forget, I was 28 years old, and I had just ended the worst, most painful relationship I had been in up until that point in my life. And I was sitting on my bed in my bedroom, just kind of like, God, why is this happening again? Mm-hmm. And for the first time, I started thinking about all the girlfriends I had had up until then. And all of a sudden it hit me that there seemed to be a pattern, a commonality, a painful commonality amongst all my girlfriends. And I had my initial idea as to what that commonality was, which I later found out was even more clearly what it was. But I had this idea, like, okay, right. I seem to be getting together with the same kind of woman over and over again, this really painful thing. So I thought, well, what kind of woman do I really want to be with instead? And as soon as I started trying to imagine the kind of woman I ideally wanted to be with, I felt this huge wave of fear go through me. Mm. And I went, I am so doomed. Yeah. You know, I seem to be like fatally attracted to these painful, negative kind of women. And I'm terrified of being with my ideal partner. So, you know, it was like no hope. So I just felt total despair that day. Mm-hmm. And then I woke up the next morning and just super determined, going, okay, this is not acceptable.
Right.
This is not, this cannot be the end of my story, my love life. Right. So then I dived into intensive therapy twice a week, and he immediately helped me get clear as to what my pattern was. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and I was like, okay, now I know even better. And that's basically what started my journey. So it started out me intensively trying to address my own love life.
And so as you were doing that, it's just like, I didn't want to be dating this type of person. I did want to be dating this type of person. So when you had that initial vision, was it when you were thinking of that and the thing that induced that fear, was it the type of person? Was it the type of relationship? Was it the intersection between those two things? Because like for me, as I think of my own journey and my own sort of dating love life and that sort of stuff, like both of those things are characteristics inside of that. There is types of people I like to be around, and then there's that thing that we co-create. And so initially, not where you are now, but initially when you had that first kind of brush of fear, was it the relationship, the person? Like what was it, the thing that really poked at you?
Well, initially, I didn't even know what I was afraid of. Initially, it was just this intense, huge wave of fear that felt debilitating, and it felt like impossible.
Yeah.
Like if I was to meet a woman like that, I'd be so scared. There's no way I could go talk to her.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And over time, I got a lot clearer as to what these fears are about.
Gotcha.
But it was just a sense of fear and I guess intimidation.
Yeah. So yeah,
and I had this. Actually, I did one of the early beliefs I got in touch with was this absolute conviction that any woman that I would be super interested in couldn't possibly be interested in me.
Yeah.
So I was just like,
yeah.
You know?
I want the good stuff, and I'm not qualified for the good stuff. Therefore, this is never going to work out.
Right. And I had this very common experience at group events, like a party or something, when I was single. Is I'd be like looking around the room. And invariably, there'd be like this one woman that would really stand out, not just because she was good looking, but her energy. There's something really, appealing about her. It's like, it's really great to talk to her. And then I kind of keep looking, and I see this other woman. It's like, oh, she seems nice. And which one would I end up talking to?
Right. Yeah.
It was the one that I wasn't that.
Right.
It was the one that I wasn't that scared of. Yeah. And I'd go talk to her, and I'd be relaxed and confident, and she'd like me, and I'd be going, this is not really the one I want to be talking to.
Right.
Talking to the other one.
And so then as you have, after going through that journey and doing the internal work and kind of figuring out what was going internally for you, now that you are on the other side of that with an amazing relationship, now that you're on the other side of that, working with people in this way, have you noticed was there commonalities to the reason why people land with, in a circumstance where sometimes they have a choice between this is something great, this is something tolerable, or whatever that process looks like of how we put ourselves out there in the world? Have you found, is there patterns? Is there consistency? Is there something that is going on that is more than just like, this is my own special little soup of fear and anxiety?
Yes. And what I'd like to do is, rather than just give you the answer, say it, what I'd like to do is lead all the listeners into their own little experience so that everybody can get their own personal answer to that question. Right? Because everybody's situation is their situation. Yeah. So what I'd like people to do is close their eyes.
If you're not driving.
If you're not driving, right? Good point. And think about your parents, whoever you grew up with. So, it might have been a traditional thing of father and a mother. You might have had a single parent. You might have had grandparents you grew up with. Whoever you grew up with. Mm-hmm. When you were little, not when you were older, but when you were little, whoever you grew up with, and think about what their top 2 most painful traits were that you dealt with growing up, right? So let's just use the most common example of having a mother and a father.
Yep.
So what were the 2 most painful traits of your mother, and what were the 2 most painful traits of your father that you grew up with? And as everybody's kind of thinking about that for a minute, I'm just going to name some common ones just to kind of help get the ball rolling. So painful traits might be, got angry easily, yelled a lot, or the overly controlling parent, or manipulative. The parent was manipulative, or critical and judgmental, or emotionally unavailable, or needy, things like that. So those are some of the most common ones. So see if any of those apply to your parents or whatever your parents' negative traits were. And hopefully you've had time to do that. Now, what I'd like you to do is think about your last 3 significant relationships. And so think of the most recent significant relationship you had. Not a quick fling thing, but just a real relationship. And notice, did that partner have any of the negative traits of your parents? So you have 4 traits now, right? Did your partner have any of those 4 negative traits? And then think of the second to last significant relationship. That person have any of those 4 negative traits? And now think of the third one. Did that person have any of those 4 negative traits? And if you're like most of us, the answer is probably, oh, crap.
Right.
That all 3 of my last significant relationships had at least 1 or 2 of my parents' negative traits, and maybe even all 4. So one of the most common and biggest problems people have in trying to find their soulmate, which presumably is some amazing partner, amazing relationship, is that instead of going in that direction where we all consciously want to go, we have this super powerful subconscious attraction to people with the worst traits of our parents, which kind of sucks. So that was the thing that I was noticing in those series of girlfriends.
And have you figured out, are there theories why that is the way that we do that sort of thing?
Yeah, but I'd like to save that for the end.
Okay.
I'd like to get a full understanding of the whole phenomenon, and at the end we'll say, okay, well, how does this happen, and what does it take to get out of it? Right?
Perfect.
Which is the ultimate answer.
Yeah.
What the hell can we do about this? All right. So basically, in a very simplistic way, I'm going to go way, way, way deeper at the end. But in a simplistic way, we form this sort of image of our adult romantic partners based on the strongest traits of our parents,
Right.
both good and bad.
Yeah.
So the good traits are not a problem, right? So if, let's say a woman, a girl had a dad who was smart and funny and playful, good traits, and unfortunately also emotionally unavailable, sadly a very common negative trait. So she will find herself drawn to smart, funny, playful, and unfortunately emotionally unavailable men. So that's the simple thing to notice, right? We'll go deeply in a while. So the end result is that people with these worst, most painful negative traits of our parents are subconsciously the sexiest people on the planet for us.
Okay.
Which again sucks.
Yeah.
Right? Now, when my therapist first explained this to me, I thought, okay, well, and he clarified my pattern for me even better than what I understood it to be. And my pattern tended at that age or in my 20s, was to get involved with somebody really quickly. So I would usually, we'd have a couple intense times together, and boom, we were together. So I thought, all right, now that I understand what my pattern is, I just need to take longer to get to know the woman, like a month instead of a week. And if she has those negative traits, then I'll avoid getting involved with her. And my therapist said, yeah, well, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Because what you don't realize is that you are picking up on subtle cues that she has that negative trait in the first 5 seconds from all the way across the room. And that's the very thing that's making you want to go talk to her. That's what's making the fireworks go off. So it's not a matter of, waiting to get to know the person. That's what's driving you to want to be with her. And it's like, uh-oh. And then there's this other side of it, though, too, which is if a person doesn't have any of these negative traits, they're just not sexy at all. So a lot of us have had this experience that's very frustrating, right? Where you meet somebody and you go, this person is great. So let's say I've had a lot of female friends go through this. We'll say, I met this guy and he's a great guy and he's good looking. It's not that he's not good looking. He's good looking, great guy. In fact, he's got most of what I'm looking for in a partner. But I just don't feel any chemistry. I wish I felt chemistry, but I can't make myself feel chemistry. If it's not there, it's just not there, right? And I'm going to be jealous of his next girlfriend because I could tell he's going to be an awesome boyfriend. But I just, I can't go there. So that's the other side of the problem, right? Is we have this powerful subconscious attraction to people with the worst traits of our parents, for the sexiest people on the planet for us, and then people who don't have that negative trait or traits. ain't sexy at all.
And it's interesting as you say that as someone who is actively online dating. I regularly see in profiles, no drama, no liar, no cheaters. and the moment I see that, for me in the back of my head, it's like, oh, this is the pattern that they have had in their last number of relationships. And if I claim this out loud, now all of a sudden I'm going to be safe. In your case, you're going, oh, I recognize these things. I just need to figure it out. They explicitly, through the help of someone on the outside or implicitly from their own experience, have recognized, oh, this is my pattern if I just name it. And it's really fascinating that even though, like you're saying, if we know that, it still doesn't mean the change is going to happen in the way that we show up, because that chemistry bit just feels so ephemeral. It's hard to like make it happen. It's there or it's not.
Yes. And actually, what you just said brings up a really interesting point. That's the most powerful and most frustrating part of this whole picture. So they were naming their pattern, right? So no drama, no cheating, no lying, whatever they said. Yeah. So there's another phenomenon that goes on here that's even more despair causing. And this phenomenon is how, and I will explain this right now, how, due to our experiences growing up with our parents' negative trait, we become overly sensitive to anything that reminds us of that negative trait and overly reactive to it in a way that will push our partner to actually behave more like that negative trait. So we can, not only are we attracted to people with the same negative traits of our parents, but we can cause our partner to manifest the negative traits of our parents even more than they naturally had it. In the most extreme case, where they didn't have it at all and we made them have it. So I'll give an example of how that works. Now I'm going to give you an example with a particular trait, but this works for all traits. Just this particular one is the easiest one to make an example for. So remember that example I already said. So the woman had a dad who was smart, funny, playful, and emotionally unavailable, right? And so most of her relationships were with guys who were emotionally unavailable. And let's say somehow she managed to dodge that bullet and she met this guy who was super emotionally available, loved, emotional connection and closeness and all the whole thing. And it's like, wow, this is incredible. I've hit the jackpot. And let's say she also somehow had the chemistry. It all worked out. Now, in any relationship, there are two basic needs for together time and separate time. And in this example, we're going to assume they want the same amount of together time and separate time to make it as perfect as we can. The only thing that doesn't match is they may not always want it at the same time. Okay? Now, if he's wanting to connect with her and she is not available for it, that's not going to cause her any problems. But let's say, in this example, let's say we're talking on the phone on Friday, and she says, "Hey, let's get together tomorrow on Saturday." And let's say this her boyfriend had this project he'd been really dying to do for a long time, and he'd been having a hard time finding a time to do it, and he decided that Saturday was the day he was going to. So he says, "Oh, I'd love to see you, but there's this project that I really want to do that I haven't been wanting to do for a long time. I want to do that on Saturday." Now, if she didn't have the experience that she had with her dad, she would be mildly disappointed, but fine. I say, okay, fine, let's get together. How about Sunday? Not a problem. But because she had a father who was emotionally unavailable, her boyfriend's unavailability, even though it was for a perfectly legitimate, normal reason, would remind her of her dad's emotional unavailability. And she would then overreact to it. And she might overreact in one of two ways. She might get kind of clingy and say, oh, well, can't you do that some other time? Look, you like hiking, right? How about if we go hiking? Can't we do that? So, and she might do that, or she might get angry. It's like, oh, okay, fine, do whatever, do your damn project. So there's this negative overreaction, right? Either clingy or angry or something. And, he might give in and spend time with her when he really didn't want to. He wanted to work on a project, or he might stick to his guns and say, say, look, I really do want to do my project, but look, you're really important to me. No, my project's not more important to me than you are. Spend 20 minutes reassuring her. The end result, though, is for him, that was an unpleasant experience. Not a big deal, but it was unpleasant. So the very next time he would see her, he's going to be just a little reserved because he just had a little bad experience with her. Now, that reserve would melt pretty quickly if they got together and she was in a good mood and they were having a nice time together. That reserve would melt. But that little reserve would remind her of her dad. And she would be, again, super sensitive to that. And she would overreact to it. So she would say, what's wrong? Seems like something's going on. He goes, no, nothing's wrong. I'm fine. It's okay. No, I can tell there's something wrong. So she'll start like grilling him or something. And, that's going to feel bad. And they might work it out and stuff. But again, he's had now another negative experience. And this will continue to escalate more and more and more, where she will unintentionally drive him further and further away. She might start a fight, all sorts of things, until finally he's now become super emotionally unavailable to her, to the point where they may even break up. And then she's like talking to her best friend and says, when I first got together with John, he was so amazing. I thought, he was nothing like any of my past partners. And I finally found the kind of guy I wanted. And what do you know? And in the end of it all, he turned out to be just like all the rest, not realizing that she'd actually created that experience for herself. So, that's another thing that we all do, right? So this is a big issue. And it's, we have a high divorce rate. And, they talk about, one of the biggest problems is communication, stuff like that. But I would claim that this kind of stuff is a much bigger problem than, helping people have better communication, because you can take any of these couples and teach them good communication techniques. And it doesn't address what's really going on.
I found that in most circumstances, when you teach people better communication skills, you just teach them how to fight more effectively.
Or more clean.
That's right. Maybe. Absolutely. Yeah. But they're not creating transformation. I'm just being more heard.
Right. So if you were to actually start dating some of these women that were saying, no drama, no lying, you would find yourself pushed into doing stuff that you're not comfortable with. And it would be like this Twilight Zone experience. Like, how did I get here? So, yeah, I wouldn't date somebody who said that kind of stuff in their profile.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's one of those things when you see that, it's like, oh, you are telling me what your experience is. Thank you very much. You've solved a problem for me and you've saved me time in that particular way. I apparently am a little less upfront about my red flags. So then... yeah.
Now you just said something about red flags.
Yeah.
I wanted to say something about that. So the other thing I hear a lot is, Stefan, you claim that, I'm subconsciously attracted to people with this negative trait, but when I first met so-and-so, they didn't act like that at all. So let's say their issue was they were with guys with anger. Because when I first met the guy, he was never acted angry. He was very sweet. And it wasn't until several months into it that his anger issue emerged. So how did that happen? Right? Because I had no red flags, no signs that he had an anger issue. And what it is, it's the same phenomenon. Just like my therapist said, you're picking up on subtle cues from across the room. That's what's going on there. Even though the person is not acting overtly angry, there are subtle cues that indicate that this is somebody who has anger. Even though they're not getting angry and yelling or something, but there might be a little tension in their voice. There might be a little something that you're picking up on that subconsciously makes you know that this person has anger.
And I can also see in those circumstances where if that is something that is there, that at the beginning we're all in our best behavior. And even for these things that we recognize, like the first 4 or 5 times for sure you hang out with me, particularly in a dating setting, it's going to be a well curated experience. I know how I'm presenting and that sort of stuff. Like I was on a date last night and we were actually joking about first date clothes and like the things that we do on first dates because we're like trying to engage in that particular way. And so even if it's not something that is at the front of my mind, I know when I act in a certain way, I turn people off. And so I'm making sure when I'm meeting someone for the first time, I'm clamping down those things that are less appealing about me, even if subconsciously they are showing up and it is obvious in some level to the other humans I'm interacting with. Consciously, I'm doing a good enough job to at least mash that down when we are showing up for the first couple of times together. And that's why it takes a few months for it to emerge.
Yeah. And at the same time, even though we're on our best behavior, which I totally agree, we are on our best behavior, we're showing our best self, the subtle cues are still there. So my pattern that my therapist helped me understand in the very first session is that I had what he called a rescuer victim pattern, where I had the rescuer, so I had the rescuer side of it, and I was attracted to women who had a victim mentality. And what I came to understand over, working through this stuff, was that I can in subtle but clear ways, come across as a rescuer without me even realizing I'm doing it, which is a beacon to women with the victim mentality. That's a complementary pair, right? People, women with the victim mentality, or men really, there's like a damsel in distress. It's like, please rescue me. And I was like the knight in shining armor. Da, 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 here I am. Right? So started out great, and then it would all fall apart.
So as you are painting this picture, which is unsurprising, it feels a little dire. Because what you're talking about here is something that we are recognizing more and more, how we as humans navigate the world in a subconscious way that we then give conscious justification for the subconscious choices that we're making. So it looks like we're in control more than we're being triggered by these things that we are drawn to. So if that is the case, then how do we start to turn the tide in that particular way so that we're not stuck in this eternal pattern of, I'm going to keep recreating this over and over again?
Right. So I'll start with what doesn't work, what people try to do, and then we can segue into the deep answer. So I had this one woman who contacted me. I had this free mini course, the 3 Secrets to Attracting Amazing Love. And she read it and she learned about this negative attraction pattern stuff, right? And she said, I read your mini course a year ago, and let me share with you my dating life in the past year. So I became very clear what my pattern was. And so I would meet this new guy, and I'd be really interested in him. We'd go out on a date. I learned to recognize consciously what these subconscious cues were, and I would recognize that, he's one of those guys. So it cut it off, right? And I wouldn't see him again. And then some time would go by, and then I'd meet another guy I was really interested in. And then we'd go on a date, and I'd go, nope, another one of those guys. So I'd cut it off. And she goes, I did that for a year. That's all I did. My whole dating life was going on single dates with guys and recognizing that they were one of my old pattern. And I never got past that. So here I am. I want help now to break out of this pattern so I don't keep doing that. Because that's not fun either. But, her conscious. See, if you understand what's going on, you can use your consciousness, your awareness, and your will to avoid getting in that kind of unhealthy relationship. But that's where it ends.
Right. Yeah. There is a great benefit of only spending one date instead of 4 months with the wrong person. There's good in that, but that's not the ultimate goal of ending up with the type of relationship that we actually want to have.
Right. All right. So we've arrived. So the first thing I'm going to describe is psychologically, how do these negative attraction patterns actually get formed? How does it happen? And then I'll talk about how to actually break out of these patterns using an advanced special version of EFT, because regular EFT is not sufficient for this. So it's easier if you use a concrete example. So I'm going to pretend that I grew up with a mother who had this, who'd get very angrily critical, where if she didn't like something I did, not only would she criticize what I did, but she would attack me as a person. So she got really angry. She said, what's the matter with you? Can't you do anything right? And she'd go, then attack what it is I actually did. So, and then I became drawn to angrily critical women. That'd be the pattern, right? Okay. So this kind of stuff, the parent's negative trait is something we're going to experience starting at a very, very young age. And it's something that's going to repeat many, many times, hundreds of times over the course of our childhood, right? So when a parent is acting out their negative trait on us, there are 3 different things that happen. One of them is pretty obvious, and 2 that are subtle but powerful. The first one, the obvious one, is that when my mom is yelling at me, acting out her painful negative trait on me, I am feeling painful feelings, right? That's obvious, right? So I might be feeling, scared and ashamed and hurt and rejected and have negative beliefs about myself, like, I'm not good enough, there's something wrong with me, things like that. So that's the obvious thing. The second thing that happens, which is very subtle, is that because it started at a very, very young age and happened many, many times, no matter how painful it was that she did, no matter how much I hated her doing it to me, deep down subconsciously, I came to believe that I deserved to be treated that way. From a place of powerlessness, because I was a little kid. Of course, I was powerless. So those 2 things would go together. I would feel powerless in this situation, And I would feel deep down like I deserved to be treated that way. So as an adult, I would become overly tolerant of being treated that way.
And it makes sense because when we are little, we're taking our cues from our parents who are like teaching us how we are. And so if my parent is treating me in this particular way, of course I'm going to walk away going, this is how I'm supposed to act in the world, because my subconscious mind says I look to these big people who are caring for me and modeling that for me.
Right. So deep down, so like I said, I become overly tolerant of being treated that way. Sometimes so overly tolerant, I don't even notice that I'm being treated badly. Plus, if as soon as anybody treats me or acts towards me in any way that even just vaguely reminds me of what my parent did, I will immediately get triggered into that same sense of powerlessness that I felt when I was a little kid. Yeah. So I'm not able to stand up for myself or anything. So that's the second thing that happens. The third thing that happens, again, subtle but powerful, is that all little kids desperately want to be loved by both parents, even abusive parents. It doesn't matter. Eventually, you may give up on the parent, but when you're like 3 or 4 years old, all you know is I want mommy to love me. I want daddy to love me. That's it. So when a parent is acting out their painful trait in me as a little kid, I am going to bend over backwards to try and like win my parents' love. But I will never succeed because my parent is not in a loving state when they're acting out their negative trait in me. I mean, they may be a generally not loving person, period. But even if it's a parent who can be loving on the one hand, but is not loving when this particular trait gets triggered, I'm going to be trying to get that parent's love in this context, and I will never succeed. And it becomes this stuck place where my inner child is in this forever loop of trying to get my parents' love. So that again, as an adult, if I meet somebody who has that negative trait, then my inner child goes, oh, maybe now I can win my parents' love. So those three things put together is what creates these powerful subconscious negative attraction patterns. Does that make sense?
It makes 100% sense. The amount of inner child work I've done with clients and like this sense of powerlessness and that little part of us trying to run our adult life and all of the things like this makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So now how do we heal all this? How do we break free? So regular EFT is not sufficient. Regular EFT only addresses the first of the three things, right? So here's if I'm trying to work with a client, or if I'm working with a client to help them break out of one of these negative attraction patterns, all it takes is healing approximately 3 representative memories of that parent doing that negative trait. And that's all it takes. But you have to do it in a way that addresses all 3 things. So with regular EFT, the way you would try and heal one of those 3 memories is you just basically relive the memory, feeling all the painful feelings, and you tap on those painful feelings until they're gone. Right? The pain level of the memory goes down to 0. When you hit 0, you go, okay, we're done. We healed that memory. But just doing that does not address the second and third thing at all. And I can easily prove it. I once had a new client, and the first session I do with a new client is I find out what their relationship patterns are, the first 5 minutes. And then we spend most of the session doing a detailed family history so I can see what the root causes are of all their adult patterns and issues, right? So I was doing that with this client, and she had a certain pattern with men, and she mentioned this thing with her dad, and it was a very obvious connection. She's like, your pattern with men comes from this experience with your dad. She goes, yep, I already knew that. I said, awesome. Okay, well, how about in our session 2, let's work on that memory. And she goes, I already worked on that memory with another EFT practitioner, and we completely healed it to 0. I said, okay, but do you still have this pattern with men? And she said, yeah, I do. And I said, would you be willing to try working on them? Anyway, we went back and forth, and I finally talked her into trying it again. Right. So then, at the very beginning of the session, I said, okay, relive the memory. Tell me how painful is the scale 0 to 10. She said 0.5. All right. We did a little tapping just to explore a little bit. And then I moved into the middle piece. In the middle piece, what we do is I had 5 years of training in something called Gestalt therapy prior to learning EFT. Okay. In Gestalt therapy, they have a lot of empowerment processes that we don't have in EFT. EFT doesn't have any kind of empowerment process. So what we do in that second piece of the healing process is we help our inner child stand up for her or himself with our internal parent, right? It's like we're going back to that in the memory. Instead of remembering the memory, we're going back to the memory, helping our inner child stand up to our internal parent with the basic message of, hey, it's not okay to treat me this way. Using this sort of, like I said, using this Gestalt process that I learned to help, and it has two effects. One is it helps break free of that subconscious belief that I deserve to be treated this way, and it's very empowering, right? Stop feeling powerless in this situation. So anyway, with this client, as soon as I switched to part 2 of the healing process, her level 0 healed memory jumped up to an 8 out of 10. Because one of the things we understand from EFT is that you can only heal the parts of a memory that you get in touch with, right? So whatever you get in touch with as you're healing a memory, you can release that. But any aspects of the experience you don't get in touch with, or you don't address in any way, still there. You haven't touched that. That's why her pain level of that memory jumped up to an 8. So anyway, we did that second piece of the process, and then we moved on to the third piece, and then she stopped having the pattern with men. So the third part of the healing process is, remember, the third part is about how our inner child gets stuck in this place of desperately wanting to get the love of the parent and not being able to. So what we do is we use EFT to heal our internal parent in a way that our real parent maybe either couldn't or wouldn't be interested in doing, so that our internal parent can now give the love that was missing in that original experience. And I need to explain a little bit more about that for people who aren't familiar with internal parent concepts. So the idea here is that when we have a painful experience, let's say 5 years old, this experience with my mom, right? The one I already said. We create what you can think of as like a snapshot of that experience, or like more of a snap video of that experience, right? Where we create from that experience an internal copy of the other person in the memory. In this case, it'd be my mother. And it's one of these bad news, good news situations. So the bad news is that this internal mother that I created in that moment in time when I was 5 looks and acts just like my real mother did in that experience, in that memory, right? That's part of the bad news. The worst news is this negative internal mother then continues to mistreat my inner child in the same way that my real mother did me, in this endless loop forever. It's what keeps the issue alive rather than just being this old distant memory. And anybody can prove it's true by just picking any one of these experiences you've had and noticing that it's still going on in the background. So it's there. On the other hand, the good news is that because our internal parent is actually a part of us, it's not our real parent at all. As soon as we create it, it's no longer has any association with our real parent. Because it's a part of us, we can use EFT to heal and transform that part of us into a loving internal parent, who then is very able to give the love that was needed to our inner child, which is the final resolution, right? So now we don't get triggered by people who remind us of our parent. We're not trying to get their love, which we're never going to get anyway. It's all healed, resolved, done. And the way I do this with a client is at the very beginning, one of the things I ask for is what I call a reference person. So say, is there somebody in your past or current life that you know fits your negative attraction patterns that you have this intense attraction to, this gut level attraction to, even though your mind goes, no way, I'm going to be horrible being with this person. And hopefully the answer is a yes. And they'll say, okay, I want you to just set your mind aside temporarily and just feel your gut level attraction on a scale of 0 to 10, how strong is it? And I'm hoping for a high number, like an 8, 9, or 10. So let's say it's a 9, right? So what we'll do is we'll do a few sessions, and I'll say, okay, now feel what your gut level attraction is that your reference person is now. And they'll go, oh, it's less. It's like a 6 now. And they'll do a couple of sessions. They'll say, what is it now? No, it's like a 3. A few more sessions, and it gets to a 0. And then the really interesting thing is when it hits 0, not only is the person no longer feeling any attraction for the reference person, but they feel an aversion instead, a bit of a yuck feeling. Ugh. And when you get that yuck feeling, you know that you have completely broken out of your negative attraction pattern forever, so that you'll never have to deal with that kind of person again. You don't have to look out for red flags. you will just be turned off by that, subconsciously turned off by them instead of subconsciously turned on by them. So it's really, really awesome experience.
And so as you're describing that, like one of the kind of fundamentals I work from when I'm thinking about transformation is this idea that transformation can only happen if we change the way we see ourselves, the way we see the world, or both. And what you've done, just very, very clearly, is laid out a transformation of both of those things. That we are seeing ourselves differently, as well as we're seeing the way that we fit into the world differently. And the moment those two things happen, it's almost like, it's almost like putting a different adapter on a plug. Like all of a sudden, the things I fit into is radically different in the world because of the way I see the world differently. I've changed how I am. That for the interface can be a different thing. But I like how just like simple and elegant and straightforward that is, because it gives us such a specific entry point into looking at not just how do we change our feelings, but how do we see the way we see ourselves and the way we see our world. So I think it's a really elegant solution in that regard.
Yeah, and we also just feel so different inside.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I mean, the person just feels so much stronger, clearer, centered. The whole thing. It's just you just experience yourself very differently.
The vocabulary I use is comfortable inside of my own skin. I was last fall. I was doing lots of the types of work that you're talking about, the way I see myself and what is acceptable and what do I need and that sort of stuff. And I was on a first date and we were at a coffee shop and we met outside the coffee shop. We went in line to get coffee because we were going to go walk in Central Park because that's what we do in New York for a date. And music's playing and I'm just bopping along and I'm dancing to it. And she's like, oh, you like to dance? And it's not that I necessarily like to dance, but for me, it was the symbol of, oh, like I'm really comfortable inside of my own skin right now because there was something in this moment that brought me joy that I was able to do without thinking about the context and how I was perceived and that sort of stuff. And for me, that was a symbol of there's not this young part of me that's afraid of the world that's trying to keep me safe. Instead, the adult version of me was there recognizing the fact that, okay, maybe this person would like that, maybe they wouldn't, but that's just who I am and that's how I feel in this particular moment, and I'm okay being that thing. And it was less about the judgment I was going to receive from my date. It was more from, oh, it was now safe for me to be who I was in the moment because the little part of me wasn't afraid of how I was going to be judged in the world and all of that.
That's right. You see, these negative trait things are places in our life where we didn't feel love, right? We felt pain and that lack of love, and that creates an insecurity within us. It creates a sort of needy spot within us, and when you heal it, it's just exactly what you said. You become comfortable in your own skin. You just feel very comfortable being yourself.
Yeah,
not worried because you don't feel a sense of lack. So if this other person doesn't like it, it's like okay.
Yeah,
oh, well.
I mean, like my entry point to tapping 16 years ago was around my social anxiety. And as we're talking about these patterns, the way that I felt was I felt like someone's kid brother that was the parents were making the big kids tolerate. Like it wasn't like anybody around me actually wanted. And intellectually, I had a lifetime of proof that that was not the case. But it prevented me from stepping in a way and engaging with the people I wanted to because I didn't feel like I belonged in that particular space. And when we're able to reparent that inner child to a place like, oh no, I deserve to take up space here, all of that stuff becomes significantly easier.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I really, again, like, people who have listened to me in the podcast for a long time know how much I like a system and a framework and something that is simple and elegant. And like just going through these three things, it's just like, it's simple and elegant. And the thing I love about simple and elegant things, once you hear them, they become obvious. It's like, of course, why didn't I see that before? And that's the way I receive this. It's like, oh yeah, of course, this is simple and perfect and straightforward. So I just really appreciate the framework and the way that you break it down so succinctly.
Oh, great. Thanks. Yeah. It's something that I am really passionate about sharing. It took me forever to work through all these blocks that I had. And I worked with that therapist for 14 years and I still wasn't done.
Right.
And twice a week for 14 years. I still wasn't done. He had all the right concepts, but he didn't have the tools. Right. So, now I can help people get through all this stuff measured in months rather than years and decades. It took me a couple of decades, basically.
I really hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Like I said, it was super, super insightful for me. I enjoyed the conversation. Going back and editing it gave me a chance to re-listen and relearn all of that. Stefan has actually put together a process to help you to unpack the stuff that we talked about and more. There's a free little mini course. All you need to do is go to single2soulmate.me. That's single and then the number 2, soulmate.me. We've also included that link in the show notes. We've included that link down below the player if you're listening to this in the website, so you get an opportunity to engage with Stefan and his amazing, amazing work, so you can move to creating the type of relationship that you want to have in your life. If you know someone in your life who could appreciate a conversation like this, please be our ambassadors and pass it along. Don't spam your inbox, but you might know one or two people who will really appreciate a conversation like this. Also, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the podcast. Remember, in podcasting parlance with this show, subscribe is free. You can find the show basically everywhere you find audio online. You can find it in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, Audible, basically everywhere audio is available online. We also have video versions of many of the episodes on YouTube. All you need to do is search Tapping Q&A, click subscribe, click follow. Most importantly, turn on those notifications so each time a new episode comes out, you are notified right away. If you have a question, a comment, a topic you'd like us to cover in the future, I can always be reached at support@tappingqa.com. I love getting your feedback. I love getting your ideas. Some of the best shows and best interviews we've ever done have come from recommendations from listeners just like you. So please, please, please reach out. For the Tapping Q&A podcast, this is Gene Montrestelli. Hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye. The Tapping Q&A podcast is copyright Gene Montrestelli Tapping Q&A. All views expressed by guests are those of the guests and not necessarily of Gene Montrestelli and Tapping Q&A.